Hello everyone, and welcome to your baking video for the month of June. As we are heading into the full-on summer months and it's starting to get really warm outside, it's going to be a great time to start doing one of my favorite outdoor activities, which is hiking, whether it's up mountains or hiking in the plains at Lake Pueblo State Park. It's important to have food to keep you energized while you're doing your physical activity. So I managed to find a couple hiking adjacent baking recipes from one of the books in our collection. If you've played the game Skyrim, you might recognize the title of this cookbook, which is The Elder Scrolls. When I first checked out this book, I wasn't looking for the recipes, but I found two that I think will be great for us to try. The first will hopefully look like this, and it's called a Nut and Seed Loaf. Here's the description from the book. Packed with protein and nutrition, a little slice of this loaf goes a long way. It's an ideal addition to the rations of any adventurers keen to make a name for themselves in the wilds of Tamriel, where an assortment of foraged ingredients can be added, such as ironwood nuts and seeds from an assortment of wildflowers. The thing I like about this recipe is it's kind of open to interpretation based on what you have at home or what nuts and seeds you can find at your local grocery store. And on top of that, it's only broken down into 3 instructions. The second recipe I've picked for the month of June is this, and hopefully they'll come out looking like this on our skewers. I might be using chopsticks, I'm not sure how well they'll stay together. These are called honey nut treats. Here's a description from the book. Honey nut treats are one of the most loved sweets in all of Skyrim. Made with a variety of delicious ingredients from different parts of Tamriel, they're actually quite easy and quick to make at your own hearth. I chose this one because it says pairs well with a large breakfast before adventuring or picnics. So even if you're not necessarily hiking, it'll still be great for any outdoor adventure. We're going to get started with our nut and seed loaf first, since that one has to bake for 45 minutes before we can cut it up and eat it. And then while that's baking, we'll go ahead and make our honey nut treats. And without further ado, let's get started. For this recipe, we'll need 2 cups of rolled oats, 4 eggs, 1½ teaspoons of salt, a ½ a cup of dried currants, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. And then you're going to want 2 cups of mixed nuts. Here I have almonds, pine nuts, pecan nuts, walnuts, and even some macadamia nuts. And 3 cups of mixed seeds. The book suggests poppy, chia, sesame, sunflower, millet, pumpkin, flax, etc. I have whole flax seeds, chia seeds, and pepitas. Here I've already measured out my oats, and I went through and used a ½ cup measuring cup to measure out the different nuts into 2 cups and added that to the oats. Then I moved on to measuring out 3 cups of seeds. I did 1 cup each of chia, flax, and pepitas, and added them directly to the large mixing bowl with the oats and nuts. Preheated the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and grabbed my 8½ by 4½ inch loaf pan and lined it with parchment paper. I ended up going back and trimming the paper to fit it better later. Then I started mixing in the rest of the ingredients, including the salt, the dried currants, and then the 4 eggs. After I cracked each egg, I checked to make sure I didn't get any shells in the bowl before adding it to the rest of the ingredients. The last ingredient I added was the apple cider vinegar, 1 tablespoon. Then I started giving it a good mix to incorporate all the ingredients together. After mixing for a while, your mixture should look something like this. Then, I started scooping it into the loaf pan. As I went through and added additional layers of the mixture, I pressed down the previous ones with my spoon just to make sure that the loaf would be nice and dense and really tightly packed. We want to make sure when we pull this out of the oven later and pull it out of the pan that it doesn't crumble immediately into granola. That's one of the reasons why we want it packed so tightly. Then I placed the loaf pan in the oven to bake for about 45 minutes. And then we can get started right away with our second recipe. Our second recipe will need 1 cup of pitted dates, a half a cup of golden raisins, 1 cup sliced almonds, 1 cup rolled oats, 1/4 cup of honey, 1/4 cup of smooth or crunchy peanut butter. I have creamy peanut butter here, a pinch of cinnamon, and a pinch of salt. I grabbed our food processor and poured in the dates and raisins. We need them to be in slightly smaller pieces in order to be able to roll them into smaller balls effectively. After pulsing for a while, the fruits were broken down into smaller chunks. And then I added the almonds and the oats. And pulsed a few more times just to get everything mixed together really well. Overall, I'd say the theme for this recipe was the word sticky, and here it comes, more sticky with the honey and peanut butter. I measured both of these ingredients out into a microwave-safe bowl rather than using a double boiler, which is another option listed in the book. I ended up putting this in the microwave twice, each time for 10-second intervals, and then I thought it was liquidy enough to add to the rest of the ingredients. This is going to be the glue that holds our honey nut treats together. Stirring this around incorporated everything even more, and eventually I added a sprinkle of cinnamon and a sprinkle of salt. Once everything was well mixed, it was ready to start forming into little balls. The book says to take a small amount, smash it flat between your hands, and then roll it. But after doing this a few times, the palms of my hands got very sticky and coated in the mixture. So eventually I just switched to pressing and shaping the treats with my fingers instead. You can see it's starting to stick to my hand more and more, but here's all our rounded honey nut treats. They're ready to be stuck on their skewers, so I used a wooden kebab stick and also a chopstick that we had at home. You might want to check if you're using any sticks, any wooden sticks, that there's nothing that could give you a splinter when you go to pull off the treat, or if you're going to eat the treat off the stick. You can see I wasn't a huge fan of the kebab stick. They didn't stick so great. After everything was on the skewers, it was about time to pull the loaf out. I tapped it with a spoon to make sure I got a hollow sound back to let me know it was done. All right, everyone, and here are the final products for both of the hiking treats that we made today. So we have the Nut and Seed Loaf. Now it's completely cooled. I've cut it off some. I'd probably recommend letting it cool a little bit more. It's still kind of flaky. Because this loaf is so dense and nutritious, thinner slices are advisable. It is kind of a challenge to cut thinner slices though, so I think the longer you let this rest, the better time you'll have trying to cut it into slices. The book also recommends pairing this food with cream cheese, cured salmon, and jams. Maybe they're thinking it kind of replaces a bagel. I had two different types of jams I tried it with, and also the cream cheese, and the cream cheese was definitely the best, in my opinion. Best thing to pair it with. This treat kind of toes the line between being sweet and being savory. So I think that's one of the reasons why salmon is one of the things they recommend pairing with it, also because it's based on a game food. And how sweet it is could also definitely depend on what kind of seeds and what kind of nuts you use as well. In my opinion, the jams kind of overpower the taste of the Nut and Seed Loaf, and that's why I think I prefer the cream cheese. Bagels are something I sometimes take on a hike with maybe some sliced pepperoni, so this would actually be a good alternative to that. I think have more nutrition than the bagel does. Moving on to our second food that we made. This one is definitely on the sweeter end. In the process of making this, the kitchen definitely smelled like I was baking some kind of oatmeal peanut butter cookie. And just so you know, in case you decide to make these yourself, I used creamy peanut butter, but the book says you can use any kind of nuts or nut butters in this recipe, and it'll be just as tasty. I didn't have too much trouble with this recipe. The mixture was definitely very sticky, so as I kept rolling little balls, my hands got stickier and stickier, and more of the mixture would stick to my hands. So eventually I started just using my fingers to make them into little balls. And in terms of how well they stay on the skewers, the book says the rougher the skewer, the better. So I have one wooden stick, but as you can see, that didn't work quite as well as I think the chopstick did. They're rolling around a little bit, but they seem to be stuck better to the chopstick than the wooden skewer. Maybe if you have some thicker skewers at home, you'll have a better time. The good thing about these is if you take them hiking, they don't have to stay in a ball form. However they can smush to fit in your pack, they'll still taste the same. And while the Nut and Seed Loaf might crumble a bit, it could just crumble into granola and you could eat it that way too. So I hope you all have a great summer. I hope you all have some great hikes or some picnics or just some random adventures. And I hope if you do one of these recipes that you'll post a comment and let us know. Have a great June, everybody. Bye.